What is up, grinders? Welcome to a UFC 304 Crunch Time Before Lock. I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with Squirrel Patrol, John. Great card, really good card, top to bottom. But I will say, I've been doing this a long time, just like you. I don't think I've contextually seen a slate like this almost ever. I mean, there's a lot of single digit ownership out there, potential single digit. I think things will be, the bigger the contests, it'll be a little bit higher, but kind of a unique context slate with 2 5-round fights and a lot of low ownership on guys that and girls that potentially could score well.
Yeah, we've had some pretty low level cards recently, but this is the payoff, right? Like they save all the good fights for the pay per view. And yeah, we got some good fights, and it's an interesting DFS card. There's like a lot of interesting dynamics. Like I said, I think it was last week that we didn't have a single fighter on the card that had less than a 33% chance of winning their fight. This one, I think we've got to like 6 under 30% chances of winning. So yeah, some very low owned fighters, but like obviously you can't just like jam in all of those fighters that have really strong win odds because you don't have the salary. So yeah, it's an interesting card.
It is for sure, and I really look forward to breaking it down with you. There's still a $25 buy-in with 200K up top. Let's try to lead the viewers towards that 200K, right? We don't want to be duped to hell because I think there's going to be a lot of duplication, but there's also that favorite range that you like. I'm just going to start right there, man. That lower tier, that all the way to the bottom, right? There's some paths of victory on this particular slate that really open up for salary and I really think are unique builds. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think this super low range is going to go under owned. You've got about 5 fighters from Bresky down that have, they each have about a 22% chance of winning their fight. It's like one of them is probably going to win. It's just a question of who, and whoever it is probably going to be pretty low owned. We're seeing like a few of these fighters with like single digit ownership. I think the one I want to be most over the field on, there's 2 that I like that I've got tagged. Like Kiefer Crosby should be owned way higher than 6%. Like if his path to victory is like probably a first round win, it's not super likely, but if it does happen, it's going to be, it's going to be very, very high scoring. It's difficult to see a path where he wins this fight and doesn't land on the winning lineup. And then right after him is Curtis Blades. I'm concerned because I think Aspinall is going to win this fight. But this fight has happened before. Blades won in the first round. It was due to a non-contact injury, knee injury to Tom Aspinall that then he had to sit out for a while, recovering from that knee injury. I think it was a torn ACL. But yeah, so Blades if Blades wins this fight, it's a 5-round fight. And I actually think Blades' path to victory might be like to win a decision, right? Like he could, if Aspinall tires out, 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds, like Blades could take over. We've actually seen that in some couple of main events, I feel like this year, where like somebody comes out and like puts up a massive first round and then just tires as the fight goes on, like doesn't get the finish.
Who's the guy versus Strickland this year? Put up a ton of points and then just died in the 2nd round.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of them. So, Blades obviously can win this fight, and if he does, he's probably going to land on the winning lineup. So yeah, we're showing him with much higher ownership of like 18, 19%. And I think that's about. I might even go a little bit higher. I think you can justify going a little bit higher on Blades, all the way up to like his win odds. But yeah, Blades and Crosby are the 2 guys I like in this range.
I'm just not a cash guy, but I mean, people. If you play Curtis Blades in cash, know he could get knocked out immediately, right? Like that's legitimately in play. Like a quick win bonus is in play for Mr. Aspinall. We've seen Blades starched before. But I think the deeper the fight goes, like if there was live DFS, I'm like putting Blades in my lineups real quick, like second, like say the 2.5 rounds, I'm like going over, right? I'm like, all right, Blades equity starts going up. And the problem is he is getting more ownership in this territory, like you were saying. I'm going to include like Giga on down, right? Like you don't want to necessarily say Giga. I don't want to say Giga, but that fight itself is one of the lowest owned fights I've ever seen in MMA history, according to our ownership. Do you think it's going to be that low? And my traditional thinking is the higher level fights as you move up the food chain, when they get competitive, that fantasy starts to fall off a cliff, right? Because there's so much on stakes. Like Allen's fight style, he doesn't grapple heavy all the time. Maybe he starts implementing it here at single digit ownership. And then Giga's side of things, I mean, I think he'd have to hurt Allen and finish him to really get over the hurdle here, because he's in enemy territory, right? We have a lot of English love on this card. But have you ever seen this type of fight be so low owned? Because like if there's constant action, yes, but it distance striking, we know what we're signing up for if you're playing it. It could be a bust.
Yeah, so I do think it'll be higher owned, maybe than we're indicating. Not dramatically higher owned. I think it is like one of the worst fights to target on the card. But you never know what's going to happen, right? Like we've seen, like Liam says, like somebody could slip on a banana peel, but like we literally have seen fighters get punched, fall down, dislocate their elbow, and that's the end of the fight, right? Like on a fight we thought was going to be like a kind of a low paced, slow, striking only affair kind of thing. So yeah, Arnold Allen, I think we're showing him with about 6% ownership. He should be higher owned than that. Like I might go double that, but I'm not going to go, and that's like for a large field. I get concerned about the fights where both fighters' styles, both fighters think they might be able to win a decision, right? Like because neither fighter is necessarily going to be pushing the pace. But Arnold Allen has about a 10% chance of winning in the first round. So yeah, he should be owned more than 6%. But I'm not going to go
not by much, is what you're saying. That's just weird context, right? So you have that fight, and then in this range you have the Bresky and the Brazil fight. I looked at Bresky as a very interesting play on this slate, because I think just like you mentioned with Crosby, right? Any form of a win for Bresky, unless he's getting taken down and controlled for long durations of the time, he's got insane volume for heavyweight. Like this guy can actually throw a lot of volume. I think a decision where he doesn't get like 5 minutes controlled would look pretty interesting. And then Brazil side of things, oof, rough. I mean, how many times have we seen Molly McCann submitted and really drop the ball and fumble situations where the UFC put her in a winnable position? But at the same token, Molly McCann's a great fantasy asset, and lower ownership for her. Totally different fights, right? You have a men's heavyweight and you have this little weight class for the girls here, but both fights have upside.
Yeah, I think they are similar fights for our purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is
they
weird
are.
to be like, look at the fights. They're going to look much different. But for our purposes, they could be about the same. Like both, Bresky and Brazil have about a similar chance of winning, and probably would be like putting up a similar score, maybe through different ways. I don't know. I kind of like both the favorites, though. Like I think, I think Molly McCann is probably set up pretty well here to win. Similar to like Patty Kimmel. Like they're always in the same cards, and they're usually kind of set up in a similar fashion. I think McCann is probably going to win this one. Like I haven't been super impressed with Bruna Brazil and her UFC career. And I think McCann could be sneaky high scoring, similar to like Nick Parkin. The line's actually moving heavily in Parkin's favor over the last day or so. I think he's just about the biggest favorite on the card now, and you don't have to pay all the way up for him. I'm just not sure he's going to be really high scoring, but he could be like this. He could get a couple of takedowns, and it could be one of those fights like we've seen recently where he just gets one takedown each round early and gets about 4 minutes of control time each round. He's adding some ground strikes, and it ends up with a pretty big score, even in a decision win. So we'll see. I'm like Mick Parkin is a fighter that's kind of growing on me over the course of the last 24 36 hours as the odds have moved in his favor.
I mean, I'm not calling for home cooking, but there's a world where a lot of fans are going to be screaming in their back pocket. Mick Parkin's one of their guys. Molly McCann absolutely is one of those girls. If you told me either of those two fights go to a decision, I would say the question mark is how big is the ceiling? You know what I mean? Because Parkin and McCann, for our purposes, definitely the same type of fight, completely different commodities, I would say, because Mick doesn't wrestle at a high rate like I would like him to. But let's talk about the lowest price fighter, who is one of those first round guys. I don't know if he's grown on you for the week. I'm talking myself into wanting to click at least in one of my lineups, especially in single entry and higher dollar stuff. Daniel Pineda, this guy can actually score pretty damn well in that first round. But no, after the 7.5-minute mark, he is going to fall off a cliff big time. He's durable enough usually to be okay and get to a decision. So maybe he can win you 2 rounds. Another guy that could probably do anything and be okay. Are you looking at this slate that you need 100 points plus for each fighter? Or are you looking at this one where you could get by? Like Nathaniel Wood gets taken down 2-3 times in the first round. Then he just picks up in the second and third. I just don't know how you get to do Nathaniel Wood on this slate. That's what I'm trying to get at too.
Yeah, so I think you bring up some good points there. I'm going to sound like Blender a little bit, right? But you've got to think about the contextual variables of the slate. And it's 14 fights. We're going in, hopefully stays at 14 fights. Everybody, I think one fighter made weight. I think Jake Hadley missed by a little bit, and he's somewhat short notice. But yeah, all the fights are on as of right now. Hopefully they stay on. I do think you need a higher score. Like the more fights you have on the card, the higher score you need from each fighter. So that's kind of one of the reasons I don't like Giga Chikaze so much, right? Like he puts up like 50-point wins, and even at 7,200 with like a 50-point win, like he's somebody beneath him's probably going to win, and probably put up more than 50 points when they do. So that like would knock Giga potentially off of the winning lineup in a low scoring win. So yeah, Pineda I think can put up a high score in a win. I think he might end up a little bit higher owned because just being like similar to the way that sometimes the most expensive fighter can end up over-owned. I think on this slate, people are going to want to go to Aspinall. If they're not going to Aspinall, they may want to go to Patterson. And then I think and people aren't going to necessarily want to play Nathaniel Wood. So I think if you're hand building, I think it might be tempting. Be like, all right, I want Aspinall, I want Patterson, or maybe I want Aspinall and I want McCann. And then like, oh, I don't like Nathaniel Wood so much, so I'm going to pick Pineda, right? I'm going to just hope that Pineda wins. Then I have to worry about not having Wood in my lineup, and I'm getting all the salary I need to spend up. So I think Pineda might end up being a little bit higher owned. Like I'll probably roster him like my 150 set right around this, 14% mark. I think that's about right. Maybe a little bit higher. I'm a little bit worried he's going to show up a little bit higher owned in this, which would make him a little bit over.
Yeah, interesting. If that's the case, then maybe I will. It's all an ownership play plus that salary relief, and then the jam in the high, right? Like a 3-3 build probably isn't normal. What were you seeing yesterday if you were playing around with the tools? What was it? Probably going mid-range, right? And then grabbing an underdog from one of the 5-round fights, I imagine.
Yeah, I like the idea of going mid-range. And maybe, so I think that there's going to be some fighters that are a little bit over-owned. Like I think Bilal might end up being over-owned in tournaments. Like I think he's a great floor play for cash games because there's a good chance this fight goes to decision all 5 rounds. What is Bilal's like 7,400? Like he gives you a nice floor of points. Like if you put in Leon Edwards and put Bilal in for cash games, that's giving you a pretty good floor, likely to go 5 rounds. I think someone that's going to like leak over to tournaments because like Bilal doesn't necessarily put up the highest score in a win. He might get like a 75, 80-point win. And so I think I like the idea of using other fighters other than Bilal in tournaments. But I do like this mid-range could go a little bit overlooked. Like I think people are going to see these like massive win odds on like Tom Aspinall, Sam Patterson, maybe Nathaniel Wood if they can afford them, and they're going to try to go up there. Like when you've got your 14 winners at the end of the night, like Makayev could have a really high score if he wins.
Don't let me. I can't wait to say that. That's my guy, man. I mean, what do we talk about all the time? I'm going to have to go right to it. You said the name Makayev. This is one of the best buy low spots. Dynamic pricing, I talk about it. If it were a thing, he'd be easily close to 10K every time he's out there. He's got mat returns. That means 5 points. And then he gets back up. Boom, mat return again, another 5 points. The control time. Pitter patter, let's get at her, right? Let's get some more pitter patter on the ground. But 8,400 against Kopp, and Kopp early in the week was supposed to be higher owned than Makayev. Now, I understand that because there's some bad blood, but don't let the bad blood change the fact that Manel Kopp is the flyweight Derek Lewis, right?
Yeah.
For fantasy purposes.
Right. I'm a little bit worried. These guys are such good friends outside the octagon. What if, what if there's not much violence? No, like these guys have been talking about literally killing each other all week. So I think I like Makayev to score better, right? I think like Cop could put up a low score, and and Mikhaev is favored. So yeah, I like the Mikhaev side. And then like Preston Parsons, I think just priced a
Yeah.
couple $100 more is another guy could get like multiple like the mat returns like you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
5 points each takedown. Um, if Obon Elliott can keep getting up, then like Parsons can pile up those takedowns. And if he doesn't, right, if there's just grappling, like the rolling around, that's reversals and sweeps, and that can add up to some sneaky fantasy points.
That's why this mid range is so interesting. You actually have finish equity, but you also have like 3 strong grappling, right? You have what we said, Mokayev. We have Parsons, but Kyle Loughran, man, this guy looks to be one of our fantasy darlings right now and in the future, purely from volume based striking, volume grappling. My problem, and I'm just going to say maybe it was the bright lights of his, he did make a debut in Paris or whatever and didn't do well. I'm not counting that fight, right? Late notice, whatever. He scored well there in a loss. But he didn't get going in the first round. Imagine if we had him full force going for it in the first round, right, John? Like, this is a guy who could actually score very, very well over 3 rounds of pure action or in a finish. And Hadley, that weight miss tells a lot to me. I don't know about you. I mean, Hadley's path is probably going to have to be a finish here. I mean, I just think the pressure might cook him, and Hadley's just dropped the ball so far in the UFC.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is exactly what I like to target, is because it's very easy to look up like inside the distance lines, right? When you're building a lineup, or even if you're trying to like make some projections, or that's factored heavily into projections. Is like, well, what are the chances of the fight ending early? What people don't like think about as much in my mind is like the actual DraftKings scoring, like who can score well in a decision win, like how Loughran, could put up a big score in a decision win. I think his last win was a decision, put up over 100 DraftKings points. So that's the exact kind of thing that I like to target. Yeah, at 8,700. Yeah, his last win was like 111 points. I think Jake Hadley is late replacement, like missed weight. Not going to hold that against him personally because I think he's only had a couple weeks notice here.
No, you can. He's unprofessional. Let's
okay. All right. Yeah.
Hold
but
it against
it
him.
also like it occurs to me he's English, right? And so I think Loughran's, I forget who he was supposed to originally fight, but it occurs to me that like maybe there's kind of picking Jake Hadley out of the crowd, basically, right? Almost like Danny Gay, right? Like, oh, he's here and he's in England, he's local, like doesn't have to adjust to the time zone or whatever, doesn't have to travel, like let's have him fight Jake Hadley, and then Jake Hadley's like, sure, yeah, I'll do it, and that I think Loughran can win this fight and put up a big score. So and he's gonna one of these guys might go overlooked, right? So at 8,700 is the exact kind of play that I'd like to target.
Honestly, Ramon Tavares was the guy who actually comes out and bangs, has volume striking. I wouldn't have wanted to see that fight because that would have been concerning, right? We probably would have been saying the opposite thing, where it would have been Loughran has more pass to stalling out if it's like long striking on the feet, but I don't see that happening here. I think the pace will be very damn good. We have a question in the YouTube chat. DK GPPs, Loughran with value and leave a lot of money on the table versus spinning up for Loughran or go lower to Mikhaev and leave even more money on the table. Already has McCann in their lineups. Well, McCann's going to give you lower ownership right off the bat, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you go either way. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer that we can pick. I like both Loughran and Mikhaev. I would say probably stick with Loughran. I think you're getting better win odds and similar like scoring ability. I like the idea like Jake Hadley's gone to decision in his losses because that makes me like Loughran, right? Because there's possibility of putting up like one of those massive like multiple takedown scores. So yeah, I'd say you can stick with Loughran. Like, you don't necessarily need to like leave a ton more money on the table or anything.
Yeah, and also right there, I mean, you mentioned him. I'm just going to go back over to Preston Parsons. This is the grapple fun one because I can see a lot of transitions in that particular fight. You mentioned it. Obon Elliott's somewhat of an X factor here. What happens if he looks like a 30-27 or if he looks like a minus 1,000, right? Like, is he potentially a guy that you're going to not overlook like maybe people do on this slate? Because 23% is probably going to be accurate. That's the problem, right, Squirrel? Like, he's owned where he should be, but I mean, this is a guy I wanted to target against Val Woodburn, right? And then Woodburn's getting takedowns and stuff on him. So
Yeah, so I don't love Elliott because I don't think his chances of getting like a bunch of grappling points and a bunch of takedowns are as high in this matchup. But like yeah, I don't know. I think you have to have him represented if you're doing multiple lineups. I just like the other side of the fight better with Parsons. Um, so I'm probably going to end up over the field on Parsons, maybe a little bit under the field on Elliott. But it's a fight that scares me, right? Because Elliott could put up like if he gets like a first round finish, first round knockout, like he could put up a big score, and at 7,600, then that probably lands him on the winning lineup.
yeah, no, absolutely. There's very, very clearly a fighter and fight that we want to talk about in this middle range, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. We got to talk about Gregory Rodriguez, who always produces in his fights, whether he's getting finished or he's finishing. I worry about the pace of this fight. Let me be honest, right? Like, I like that there's equity to finish, but I think the longer this fight goes for our purposes, fantasy wise, I wonder what it's going to look like. If there's a little bit of grappling, maybe Rodriguez finally pulls the trigger. Maybe he does it here. I think it falls off a cliff. And at 7,900 and 8,300, they're just both right there in the middle range where we talked about some of those lower plays down the board that have that upside, which these guys certainly do have the upside, right? I just worry that Duncan plays a little flashy game. He wants the strike. He's in his home over in England. Rodriguez likes to bang, but it just falls off a cliff the deeper this one goes.
Yeah, like this is a scary one.
Yeah, it is. It
I
really
think
is.
it's one you've gotta have a good you've gotta have good ownership on this fight. I think it's minus like 250 to end inside the distance. And these are big guys. They can hurt someone and put them out of a fight with one punch or with grappling. Like on the side of Rodriguez. Yeah, I don't know. This is a good fight to target. So I kind of like the Christian Leroy Duncan side, a little bit younger. And so, I think you gotta go with that, right? That he's the favorite fighter. I think he's favored for a reason. He does have like the home octagon advantage. So I like the Christian Leroy Duncan side. I did go back and forth over whether to tag Gregory Rodriguez because obviously he has a shot to win as well, and he can put up a massive score as well in his win. Overall, I think it's just a great fight to target. I hope it gets overlooked in the middle range. But yeah, somebody's likely going to get hurt here and put up and then his opponent's going to put up a big DK score.
I know, and you nailed it. It's one of those ones where like I don't want to play one of these guys because of the ownership, but I know the upside's there, and Duncan's one of those commodities where he's variance, right? But he's variance where as long as it's a competitive fight, the scoring will be there. But if it's ends up being distance striking and he's doing these flashy strikes, that's going to slow the pace down a little. So Gregory Rodriguez definitely wants to go into that violence. And to be fair, they're on the main card. They're going to want to go for 50K. Let's factor that in as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, like speaking of the main card, something we should mention that people may not realize. I didn't realize it at first. Like I realized the card's starting at 6:00, and I realized the card is in the UK, right? It's done. I think it's about 5 hours ahead of us. So the main card is going to be starting super late. I think the main card starts at 10 p.m. Eastern time. That main card is going to be starting at 3 a.m. Local time. The main so the main card is starting at 3 a.m. local time. The main events are probably going to be starting around 5 a.m. local time. That could be like a very rowdy crowd. It could be like a very tired crowd. But I agree. Like, yeah, in terms of these guys, are Gregory Rodriguez and Christian Leroy Duncan probably going to be aiming for some violence to maybe get a fight of the night or, get a 50K finish bonus.
I'll tell you what fight is not going to be going for a 50K bonus. And two guys that are very happy to be in the UFC still. It's Modestas Bukauskas versus Marcin Prachnio. This is like the sore thumb on the whole slate. Like there's an ugly women's MMA I'll pivot to after this that's even better of a target than this fight. And the weight class would dictate, hey, there's finish equity, right? With either of these guys, but they just don't do anything. They literally shadow box for 3 rounds. we know what we're dealing with, because if you don't play it, there's a finish. If you play it, they go to a decision and score 52 points.
Right. So this is a reason like why you have every fighter. If you're doing like a bunch of lineups, I think if you do like 20 lineups or more, you should probably have every fighter in at least one lineup. Because these guys have odds to win inside the first round. Both of them do. But the fight is likely to go to decision, and it's just not high paced. So if it does go to decision as expected, like there's a good chance that the winner just isn't putting up a very high score. But it's not 100% to go to decision, right? Somebody could get a finish early. So I don't know. I'm going to roster these guys probably about the ownership mark. It's not my favorite fight to target, and I'm only going to roster them at their ownership mark just because their ownership is not that high. I don't think these guys have a great chance of landing on the winning lineup, but they have some chance. So if you're doing 20 lineups, yeah, you maybe want to take one or two and put Bukowskis in there. Maybe one or two, and you put kind of put Prachnio in there. Basically, if you end up with about that much salary left, it's fine. But I'm definitely not going to target it.
Imagine if it was like an 11 fight card, we'd be actually talking about that fight in more depth. That's just how the context of the slate is. And I just think it's such a unique slate because of this, right? Like nobody wants to play these guys, and they have the weight class that you have multiple knockdown upside. That happens, and I talked about it. Ugly women's MMA. Shauna Bannon versus Elise Ardeline. Ardeline is a TikTok star and OF, has a lot of fans. And Bannon is just clinching onto a UFC job, right? Like, this thing could be so damn ugly. Mr. Burns' hands had to have come out for Bannon. There's no way in hell that Blender didn't say he would like himself some Bannon. And with the ownership being Ardeline being a money line type of play, I'm buying into this fight because of the unknowns. We don't know what the hell it looks like.
Yeah, I like the Ardeline side much more than the Bannon side just because of the price. I don't think this fight's necessarily going to score, very poorly. Like, there's no reason to think that. But it's obviously not one. It's kind of ugly women's MMA. There's not a great chance of a finish. Ardeline, I think, has a better chance to win inside the distance than Bannon, and she's $1,500 less expensive. So I'm going to be going overweight the Ardeline side, or at least I'm going to have more Ardeline than I do Bannon. I think that's reflected in the ownership, but I think it's accurate. Like, Ardeline should be rostered more than Bannon. Bannon, I don't know. She might be one of my least favorite fighters on the card just because she's so expensive. Her win odds aren't great for 8,900. Like, Leon Edwards has a better chance to win at $100 less expensive. Loughran has a better chance to win at $200 less expensive. I think you can spend up to be different on Bannon, but your chances of having 6 wins in your lineup goes down. So I don't know. She's got about a 10% chances or so of winning in the first round, and at 8,900, that might be what she needs to do to win, get to land on the winning lineup. So yeah, she should be about 10% owned. That's probably about where I'll roster her. Maybe it'd be 15, maybe it'd be 8. I don't know. But she's one of the my least favorite fighters on the card.
You're going to be going, or maybe you're already out to dinner. You come back, look at your phone, and one of these fighters has 105 points. I honestly think it could be either, but I also know that they could easily go to like, what did Bannon's first fight? She would have had like 50 something points, right? Like, it wouldn't have been very good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I actually think Arleen's chances of having that 105 score probably higher than Bannon's, even though she's the underdog, because Ardeline has at least a chance to be higher scoring via an early finish, whereas like Bannon, kind of know she's probably not going to put up a great score unless something totally.
It could be more physical. That's the only thing I think is Bannon looked like she was a little bit bigger, different. Who knows? It's ugly. It's so ugly, and it's one of those other fights that kind of sticks out on the slate, right? Like we talked about just before, Prachnio and Bukakis. That one I think sticks out. This one does because it's like first fight of the night. You could get buried. Also, showdown. Don't be scared of showdown. 9 fights showdown slate. Usually it's an 8. It isn't a captain mode. I always call it showdown though. So
yeah.
No biggie on that side of things, but we got to pay some bills here. We got RotoGrinders Premium. Make sure you guys look at RotoGrinders Premium, there's never been a better time to sign up for RotoGrinders Premium with MLB, PGA, MMA, and WNBA. Hell, there's Olympics. Don't know if we'll be covering it, but I'm sure that there'll be some love in the Olympic streets, right? Basketball's back. We've also got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying all 6 individual months of combo premium. You can also get your first month of RotoGrinders Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want to get a test run in and dip their toes into the waters with our 3-day pass, $19.99. Check the links in the description for more information. Let's get to it. There's a great fight at low ownership for a guy against a veteran. King Green, no longer Bobby Green, versus Patty the Batty. Is Patty just going to come out here and go, all right, give me my $50K. I'm coming to bang in the first round? Because I think it's a high probability that these two guys are going to have a great pace in that first round. I obviously worry what the hell it looks like over the next 3, but we can agree Patty's got more tools to win this fight, right? He's got grappling in his back pocket. I know Green particularly okay with the takedown defense, or had been over his career. He just a fight ago, though, he was knocked out brutally, absolutely brutally. I can see what the UFC is trying to do. Patty the Batty, man, is a breakout spot. I just think he will be higher owned than Bobby Green. That's my one hang up.
Well, I think you could argue that he should be higher owned than Bobby Green. He's got a better inside the distance line. I like this fight. I like this one to target. If it was priced differently, like let's say, either Bobby Green or Patty Pimblett was like a huge favorite, and so the pricing was different. Then I would be off it. In the mid range, I think like these guys are gonna come out and swing, and I think they could put up big scores multiple ways. I think either of them could get an early finish. I think for the early finish, I like Patty Pimblett a little bit better. And so that's why I like him probably a little bit more than King Bobby Green. But I could see a situation as well, or maybe Pimblett comes out and he's like swinging, he's going for that early finish, and he's going for the $50K bonus or whatever, and he gets tired. And then Bobby Green could put up a massive score. We just saw him put up a massive score against Jim Miller. Like I think that's less likely to happen, but it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Like I like this. I like that realm of possibility much better than like the Sean Bannon chances of putting up massive scores, right? So like, I think this is a fight I'm interested in both sides, but I'll probably roster a little bit more Patty Pimblett. I don't know. I think maybe a lot of people that are hand building like don't like the name as much, right? And we're gonna have some more like UFC type fans than like DFS fans on a pay-per-view card playing in our contest this weekend. So I think some of those people are going to maybe skip over Patty Pimblett, right? Because they don't like him. They don't like the way he's been set up by the UFC. But I don't know.
We like that for fantasy.
Scoring, so.
We want that for fantasy. We want people to quote unquote hate the guy or not like the guy, right? I don't want to play him, right? Like I thought that would build into Bilal's side of things for fantasy, but people are too smart, right? He's got a great floor play, and somebody in chat, Londo, said Patty ITD breaks the slate 120 points. It's in the realm of possibility. Even a deep first round finish probably looks better because you got a bunch of volume, right? Whatever the hell it looks like, the knockdown potential. Like I want a deep first round finish in this fight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like comparing this fight to like that Tom Aspinall fight. Like Aspinall is set up to put up a massive score with his first round win odds. Mm-hmm. But like if he gets a first round minute at a minute and a half, and Patty Pimblett is getting one at 59 seconds, or Bobby Green is maybe getting one at 4 minutes and 59 seconds. That's much better than Aspinall. Potentially much better than Aspinall's like win in a minute and a half. So we can't predict the timing like that, right? Like we don't have that kind of accuracy or foresight.
You don't have the crystal ball.
What is that?
You don't have the crystal ball model.
Yeah, so like Aspinall is going to be much higher owned. But yeah, there are fighters that can put up a massive score depending on when they get that first round win, if they get a first round win.
Absolutely. And last bookkeeping, DK Pick 6 Firefox extension. In case you missed it, RG Premium subscribers can use the RG DK Pick 6 browser extension on Firefox to have our premium props and pick'em projections overlaid on the screen so you can quickly and easily find the lines with the best value and make expert picks all in one place. Download it for Firefox today. I'll tell you how I'm using it for MMA. I'm starting to get the hang of it. If you are out on some of these underdogs, like your range, right? Your favorite range down there, like the Bresky on down, they offer fantasy points for these guys, right? Which is fascinating because when you think about it, they're big underdogs. If they're getting dominated, they're not going to put up a lot of fantasy points. But like, for instance, you've got like a Kiefer Crosby line up for fantasy points. So if you think he's going to get controlled on the mat or get finished, you could just fade that and just say under on the fantasy points. Like, it's a very interesting way to build different, I guess, pick'em strategies.
Yeah. It's interesting. I want to get into that game. I haven't yet. They just, came legal in Virginia pretty recently. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's great to see like UFC kind of building out like all these different fantasy games like this. Because yeah, it's a great sweat. UFC DFS with the fights happening one right after another on a Saturday night.
Yeah, we're just waiting for that Millie maker. That's what you're doing, John. I know what you're doing.
Millie maker again. There's already been one.
Yeah. But 34.5 points for Crosby expected. I'll tell you, Daniel Pineda expected 37.5, actually more points than Crosby. So we know that range has upside, of course. Final takeaway, because I really do think this is a unique slate. We have the 2 5-round fights. We have a lot of condensed ownership. There's a bunch of fights kind of stuck in that, let's say 25 to 30% ownership, a quarter to a third ownership. And then there's a bunch of like under 15%. And I really think it's going to take one of those under 15% to win 115 points. And that is the key to the slate in winning $200,000.
Yeah. So I think this is a card where I'd rather target like massive scores and like for the lower owned fighters, right? Like just comparing like Bannon to Crosby. Like I'd much rather roll the dice on a Crosby because I can see the path there to him putting up a big score. It's unlikely, right? Like Bannon's way more likely to get the win. But I'd rather target somebody like Crosby, or Daniel Pineda, right? Than somebody who's gonna maybe put up a low scoring win, like Chikaze, or like a Bannon or an Arnold Allen might put up a low scoring win. So I think it's a good card to target like action fights.
Yeah, action fights for sure. The bigger the slate, the more you're looking for the ceiling. And it's such a great card, top to bottom. In context, right? We didn't even actually talk about the heavyweight main 5-rounder, but I think you talked about Blades enough that we did, right? Like Aspinall is a fantastic play. I just don't know. Last question. Aspinall, where the hell does he sit for you? Is he 50%? Like, how do you attack that? Because I feel like it's just over-owned, unfortunately.
Yeah. So my take is I think Aspinall is going to be over-owned, particularly in smaller field contests. I think he might be like 45% in a large field. He should be about 45 to 50% owned. I think he's going to go over-owned in like single entry and in smaller field contests. So I think he's a good, because who is going to put up more points in a first round win? Let's say they both get first round wins, Aspinall or Patterson. We have no idea. I know Aspinall is going to be higher owned. So I think Patterson's like an interesting play for the smaller field contests. For larger field, like, I don't know. I think you gotta have about 45, 50% Aspinall and just call it a day. and hope that, if you've got a good lineup and it's, going into the second to last fight of the night, that, hopefully Aspinall is the fighter you've got left if he's going to put up a massive score.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's that. Next week, we end up having a card over in Abu Dhabi, I believe. Noon start time, 13 fights. Sandhagen, Nurmagomedov. Great fight. Amazing fight. But we will get there next week. Make sure you guys check out all of our content before lock. That's the real big thing here. And I hope TJ got his lineups in. John, we got plenty of time to make changes. I don't want to overthink this slate, but you can take your flag and stick it in somewhere, right? And hope that we're on the right side of things.
Yeah, it should be a good card. I'm interested to see the crowd as we get into the last few fights of the night, as it's like 5 o'clock in the morning over there.
They'll be juiced up. They'll have a couple beverages. They'll be very, very happy. So we're on to next week. Thank you guys for another great show. We will see you.